I have been asked how dedicated to veganism and how strict. I don't like to say that I'm strict because I don't feel strict or restricted. I feel a very natural inclination to avoid consuming anything that resulted in pain, injury, suffering, or exploitation from an animal. I avoid honey and insect products. A lot of people wonder about ghee and about dairy in India. And I avoid ghee and dairy in India. I mean, to some extent, ghee is just kind of everywhere, but they don't use it in cooking at the Adinam. So if I only eat the Adinam food in India, I'm pretty safe. Dairy, though, I know a lot of people want to believe that because cows are worshipped in India, that means by default all dairy is nonviolent, that all dairy in India is ahimsa. That is not true. And this is hugely controversial, unfortunately, but it is entirely not true that while, maybe grandma or the neighbors or the guy down the road might keep some cows and worship them and take their milk in a way that's not violent, that they're not feeding them hormones or antibiotics or things like that, they're not removing the calves from the mothers, that certainly people like that exist, and there are Krishna Goshalas and places like that. If the milk that you're drinking in India comes from a company that's large enough to have a logo and printed packaging, then there's really no way for you to know if the milk is taken without violence. And in India, a lot of people do actually treat the cows in a way that is violent or otherwise inappropriate. That the cows are given medicine, some vague medicine, which is, it might be growth hormones in order to make them produce more. If you don't know the farmer personally, who knows what they're doing with the calves, if they're taking the calves away from the mothers. And one of the biggest things with cows in India is that cows in India are shipped across the border to Pakistan or Bangladesh and slaughtered there. And people will sell off their old cows and then claim to be ignorant about what happens to those cows when in fact the cows are being taken across the border to be slaughtered for meat and for leather. That you cannot absolve yourself of the violence that you are doing to this animal because you just sell it off and pretend you don't know what's going on. And so that these are common practices in the dairy industry in India, that any large milk producer is either taking milk from a bunch of smaller farms, and who knows what the welfare of the animals is like there, or they have a large enough farm production that they're using these violent industrial methods learned from the West, which is not something I want to participate in here or in India. So it turns out I'm lactose intolerant, and I have been lactose intolerant for quite a while. Someone did a third eye scan to see about my lactose intolerance because people kept telling me that, oh, you can heal it, you can use your third eye, you can ask Swamiji to heal it, all this stuff. And I'm like, no, I do not want to heal my lactose intolerance. I feel like it is beneficial and protective, that it is keeping me from consuming violence in dairy products. someone did a third eye scan of me and said that what she saw in some other past life, I had been a cow that experienced violence, and that my body was still responding to that by being lactose intolerant. I think it's good for me to be lactose intolerant and to not be able to consume dairy. The absolute only dairy that I have been able to consume in like the past 20 years has been milk that was offered as prasad in the main Adinam in Bangalore, in Bidadi. The milk that is offered in the temple there comes only exclusively from the Goshala on campus. That I think pretty much all the Goshala milk goes to the temple. The temple, after the offerings are made, the milk is collected and distributed. And at one point in time, I was doing rituals there on a daily basis. And so after the ritual, we would all share the leftovers, the milk and the prasad, the things that were offered. That was the only milk that I have been able to consume without getting incredibly ill. And so something about it being offered in the temple and coming from Swamiji's own Goshala made it safe for me to consume. But otherwise, I have had milk from other Goshalas. I have taken, milk as prasad from other temples, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And oh boy, let me tell you, I was in this Krishna temple here in the US, and I was so disappointed to see people bringing in like plastic jugs of ordinary milk made with violence as an offering to Krishna. People do not want to believe that milk is taken violently, that the cows are treated so poorly, that people want to think that there is some organic something, some special free-range milk where the cows are treated well, and that is simply not the case. That is simply not the case. That any company that is large enough to have a logo and printed packaging is working on too large of a scale to be able to either monitor the farming practices, or is too big to even care, and they just want more milk production and use the same sort of violent techniques. At this point, unless you get milk from the guy down the road that you know personally, there's no way of knowing the kind of violence in the milk, and people want to continue making excuses and being ignorant about the source of their milk because it's tradition, or they like the flavor, or it's just not the same to make your chai with whatever, cashew milk, almond milk, and so they're willing to consume violent dairy products and perpetuate violence against cows because of their own personal preferences. And I just don't think that's right. So I'm very, very specific and very, very, very intentional about being a vegan in this way. Okay, Nityanandam.